Hello, and welcome again to AI Ramblings with Neal Makwana, Michael Parekh, the show where we talk about exciting things that are going on in the world of AI. And a lot again, Neal, this week. Also, it's great to have Neal back. He had a wonderful trip to San Francisco. I think you're in the
Yes.
process of moving out there, and
Yeah,
you had a chance to check things out. Tell us a little
for
bit
sure.
about how was your trip? We missed you.
It was great. Yeah, I was out there for the past week or so. Actually, I had to extend the trip a bit just because a couple meetings coming up. And initially went. I have a lot of friends from college that are there in the Bay Area. I'd never been before, even though I've been to California a couple times. It was my first time out in the Bay. Got to hang out in Tahoe for a bit for the weekend. Got an Airbnb and just explored. First time out there as well, which was nice. The weather's definitely much better than here in Texas. San Francisco, I actually didn't realize downtown SF is actually a lot windier and cooler in the summer than it is the rest of the year, which is a welcome surprise to me coming from warmer temperatures here. But no, it was great. I got to visit Apple Park, which has obviously been a long time dream. Got to see some of the campus. Obviously, it's a very small sample size of the entire campus, but still got to get the vibe and feel of what Apple Park is like, and got to explore SF. And I'll be hopefully moving out there in a very soon, probably
Very
next
exciting.
week or so. Yeah, very excited.
No, that is awesome. San Francisco has been my second city for 3 decades. So I'm so glad that you liked it as much as you did, and a lot more to come. And speaking of San Francisco, a lot going on. To start off our show, news of the week. Again, lots going on, but I thought it might be useful to focus on a couple of companies because, what time of the quarter that is. It's earnings season. And
Turning season, exactly.
the Mag 7 companies first out of the block were Google and Tesla. They both reported this week. Google surprised on the upside and a lot of good fundamentals, a lot of good momentum. Stock was up a couple of percentage, but more importantly than the financial numbers, Google, through its execution on AI in particular, is starting to get investors on the institutional side especially, more comfortable with two things. Number one, that AI is an opportunity for them, just like any other of the Mac 7s and other startups. That, contrary to a lot of worries that have been with the investor community for the last couple of years, is that AI would disrupt Google's business model. And so far, the early evidence seems to be that that is not the case. Sundar went out of his way to say that they're seeing at least as good advertising monetization on AI as they're seeing with the regular Google search, which is a relative sense of relief for a lot of investors if that can be maintained going forward. We've done a lot of shows and talking about how the internet seems to be broken by all of the move to AI search, the move to AI
Yes.
browsers, where you have spent a lot of time doing some work on. And the Google results basically show that they should be able to manage well with AI search on top of their existing model. So that's number one. Number two is that they are spending just like all the other Mac 7s a lot of money. In Google's case, over 85 billion dollars this year. Collectively, the Mac 7s are probably going to spend over 300 billion this year, and that is accelerating. We've seen what Meta has done. We've talked a lot about it on the last couple of shows, that they're accelerating both in terms of AI capex and AI talent. There's a white hot talent race going on. More importantly, on that, they also seem to convince investors for now that spend does have opportunity to make it all back and more from new businesses that they're very much focused on. Everything from their Google search, Gmail, etc., to YouTube, which we're going to talk about later in the show. So all of that news of the week, Google was good news on the earnings front. The other one, but was not so good, was Tesla, where they reported weaker profits, weaker revenues, weaker sales than expectations. Elon Musk basically made the case that, hey, Wall Street, be patient. That it may take a few quarters, maybe longer, that the new businesses the company's focused on, which are specifically having to do with robo-taxis, self-driving cars, EVs, and robots, will have returns or at least sales in much bigger numbers than currently can be imagined. And there is a debate, and I was in one of the debates. I will put it up in the show notes, where the Wall Street is giving Tesla a lot of potential value in the future for those two businesses that could theoretically be worth hundreds of billions of dollars. My view has been fundamentally on a bottom-up basis that these businesses will take much longer to make into real businesses, potentially longer than 5 years. And that is different than the 1 to 3 years that Elon is projecting. And so that is a debate. The reaction post earnings on the stock was negative. Stock's down about 8-9%, down about probably 25 or more percent for the year. These things are going back and forth. And this show is not about the financial aspect of this, although that is part of the picture. There, we talk more about the secular waves and how people are using these products and services. But the financial piece is important for all the obvious reasons. So those two, to me, were the news of the week. We'll put up a lot of detailed
Yeah.
links in the show notes. But what do you think, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, touching on the Google thing first, since this is something we've obviously talked about a lot, the whole idea of the internet breaking and, there being a lot of potential fear that, Google in the end of the day is an ad tech company. They get a lot of their revenue through ads on search, and how does stuff like AI overview, which is kind of taking over the internet from all sides, whether it's on the Google side or things like Perplexity and whatnot, where you're getting the answers straight, not actually having to go through a plethora of websites to find what you want. What would that do to their ad model? And obviously, Sundar has indicated that not only has it maintained, but it's actually increased a bit. He's solidifying that these overview tools. I mean, he mentioned that they have over 2 billion monthly users, which is completely changing the way that people are interacting with the internet using these AI generated answers. And yeah, it's just another thing that we're gonna have to keep an eye on, because there obviously are big other players in the space like Perplexity, OpenAI, obviously working on their own search engine and eventual browser, I'm sure internally as well. So there's gonna be a lot of players in this space, but Google has done a good job of, I think, securing their position. And yeah, we'll just have to see where this goes. But on the Tesla side of things, not only has Tesla as a company been going through, a couple of things, but also Elon, obviously, as we discussed in the last show, from a public facing point of view, has been making, several questionable decisions, we'll say, with things like Grok and XAI and whatnot. So as much as that is adjacent to the Tesla thing, these are all things to obviously take into account when talking about these things.
No, so it's a best of times, worst of times in terms of bookend
Yeah.
pieces on the Mag 7. So, but speaking of Google, the that kind of leads us into our main topic for the week, which is again, a lot happened this week on AI. But one thing that was particularly interesting to note was that Google's YouTube service did cross a major threshold, where on a number of metrics out there, they are now the mainstream mechanism or device that households in the US are using to play YouTube much more on their TVs than on their other devices, smartphones, phones, etc. And this has been the case a little bit in terms of the younger generation, but now it seems like it's pervasive up and down the demographic segments, etc. Again, we'll put up a lot of the data up on the show notes, but it's a very important trend to kind of highlight. Obviously, it's not just YouTube that's been very successful. There's been a big transition to short form video, etc. So companies like TikTok kind of led the way, followed by Google with YouTube Shorts, and obviously Meta with Reels on their multi-billion user properties like Instagram and so on. But the broad theme is that this trend is now so big that it's now utterly mainstream. People are watching this on their TVs, etc. And all of the services, YouTube, Netflix, etc., are rejiggering their applications, their ad models, subscription models, etc., for the big TV experience. So there's a lot going on there, and a lot of this again is Gen Z. I mean, look, I'll give you credit, Neil. Over a decade ago, even though I've been following Google since it was a private company, you put YouTube on my radar, because I remember when you were 12 or something, you were watching nothing but YouTube. And at the time, I remember, walking by and you were on your Mac and asking what you were watching. And you were watching soccer players, football players, Messi and so on,
Yeah.
for hours on end. So you and your generation has been on this a lot longer than us.
Yeah.
You know, and now you're in your season. It's a mainstream thing. What do you think?
Hasn't changed. No, I agree. I mean, it has to do with this whole idea of, I mean, this overall shift is something I kind of wrote about on my last Substack post, where I focus on this whole idea of the attention economy and how short form is kind of taken over, and it's causing a lot of these companies to augment kind of how they're outputting data. Because in the end of the day, I think it's no surprise that people's attention spans are getting shorter with the advent of things like short form video. And this, the precursor to this, as you said, is YouTube. I mean, the amount of friends I know that are watching YouTube on their TVs. I was just, crashing with an old roommate of mine in San Francisco, and all we would do when we're eating dinner, we wouldn't turn on Netflix, we wouldn't turn on YouTube TV, which is obviously their cable TV subscription platform. We would just watch videos on YouTube with ads about anything. I mean, whatever's trending right now, about topics we're interested in. This is the trend that's existed for a long time. The amount of people I know that just have an iPad or an iPhone out when they're eating a meal, watching YouTube. It's rarely a show. I'll see people just consuming all types of content, whether it is things like shorts, which is on YouTube, obviously, or longer form content. And it's a trend that's also being seen with things like, the recent cancellation of Stephen Colbert's show. The amount of people I know that consume these types of shows, whether it's the opening monologues or highlights or guest appearances, just through clips on YouTube, is astonishing. Even things like SNL. SNL is something that I don't think has resonated as much with people my age in terms of maybe watching it live as it airs. But the amount of people I know, friends of mine, that are saying, "Hey, did you watch this skit? Did you watch this skit?" And it's not things that they watched live. It's just recaps, or it's clips of it on YouTube that they're sharing with other people. It's no surprise that this is an ongoing trend, and it's going to be very interesting to see how it shifts with short form becoming more prevalent over time as well.
No, I think you put a finger on a very key point. Obviously, the Colbert news was the big news, also big news of the week, and a very important topic. Everyone bemoaning, hey, the most popular late night show is getting canceled. What does this mean? Is this politics? Is this? Is this that? But the reality is, a big chunk of their audience, not just you, I have stopped for the last year and a half watching late night show, which I do like. I used to watch Colbert show all the time at night. But these days, I just watch the 10-minute monologue on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, and almost never go to the main show. What does that mean? Well, that means the advertising revenues are going to be lower, even though CBS would make some piece of that back through the YouTube clips, but they're not enough to make up the whole thing. And again, what does that mean? That means traditional media markets shrink. We've seen this. I remember when I was the head of internet research at Goldman in the 90s, the big issue was what this would do to newspaper businesses. And I wrote pieces, research reports that said, look, the newspapers won't go away, but the collective volume of the newspaper revenues will shrink relative to what they used to be, because some of that will reoccur online, and the monetization will be different. We saw the same thing with music, and now we're seeing obviously that massive fragmentation to television. So from a business model point of view, we're now seeing mainstream shows like late night, etc., fragment. And I had a piece up on this Colbert thing as well, where yeah, the late show may be gone, but Colbert is going to be probably back bigger than ever. Smaller staff. He'll be on YouTube and possibly on Netflix, and will probably make as much as he ever did, if not more, with a core team of people. In fact, we're seeing now in the creator economy on YouTube, etc., where YouTube is the biggest provider. That economy is now en route to being a $500 billion business, according to Goldman Sachs estimates, in the next couple of years. And there are creators now today that essentially put daytime shows, afternoon shows, evening shows, talk shows that have audiences almost as big, if not bigger, than the traditional media providers. So we've already crossed that threshold on that side of the equation. And so a lot of the YouTube stuff that's happening is we're at that crossover point, and it's just going to continue from there. So interesting main topic of the week. Again, we'll have a ton of links and discussions in the show notes, so please do take a look at that. So let's now go to read of the week.
Yes.
You have another good one this week as well, Neal.
Yeah.
Why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah. So mine is once again kind of building on this whole the impact of AI on Gen Z, especially from an educational point of view. I just finished my master's program, 4 years of undergrad, and these AI tools kind of popped up midway through. So I've kind of experienced before and after, and seen how it's impacted both how I work and how others around me work. And the piece I wanted to focus on is New York Times opinion guest essay, where it's titled "I Teach Creative Writing. This is what AI is doing to students." It's written by Megan O'Rourke, who's an executive editor of the Yale Review and also a professor of creative writing at Yale. Megan essentially highlights things that we've discussed a bit on on the podcast before, where these AI tools are now being used as companions to help people brainstorm, summarize, and translate, and almost scaffold their writing rather than obviously the main warning signs and thing that people were concerned about with things like cheating, obviously with startups like Cluely creating a lot of buzz to help you cheat better. It's this whole trade-off of how much inherent value is there from a creative point of view, obviously here with the focus of creative writing. And she kind of words things in a really interesting way. And I think the good thing about this piece is rather than trying to provide answers, it really just asks a bunch of questions that will drive discussion forward, hopefully, in this area, which is part of the reason why I wanted to focus on it for this week. Because there's things like deep research and whatnot that help make writing more accessible because it saves people time and eases this like mental labor that would traditionally exist with writing things short or long. I lean on deep research all the time, and I've actually used some of these writing tools when starting my Substack as of late, where I'll kind of provide an outline of things that I want to touch on just to kind of help.
Everyone should subscribe to Neal's Substack. It's
Yeah,
awesome. We'll put the link in the show notes. It's
thank you.
really very
Yeah,
good.
but essentially my workflow, and I guess how I use it, I can provide a bit of insight into that. Is I'll have an idea topic, and I'll have a array of bullet points, things I want to highlight and whatnot. I'll just give it to Chat GPT and say, give me an outline of a post that I might want to do on this, just to get just a mental map of things I might want to cover, things I might have looked over. Obviously, with things like this, when you're writing, it's very easy to get in the weeds of things and maybe forget this like 50,000-foot bird's eye view of the topic you're talking about. So it helps me kind of align the topic I'm going to discuss and how to approach it from a writing point of view, since this is something I'm just now getting back into, is writing. She kind of talks about how the influence kind of blurs the line a bit between a tool and a collaborator, because some people might think that it's harder to get authentic ownership over the creative work because a lot of these models are emulating obviously the training data that have been fed into them. And some people fear that it might take away some of the creative voice and nuance, which is something I've experienced also. A lot of times I'll write a post and then I'll give it to ChatGPT to clean up, and it'll completely strip any humor or any like Gen Z type of feel that I've intentionally put into the piece, and it'll make it a lot more generic. So to which point I have to kind of revert back to my original version. So it's just kind of balance of it being a creative tool versus it being a crutch that people lean on to create content. One specific point that I really liked was she brought up AI style and the idea of like processed food. Obviously, a lot of people my age are concerned about having whole food diets and being healthy and whatnot. I think this parallel is really timely because it kind of draws a line between the two, saying that while AI generated writing is clean and competent, it can often feel artificial, similar to things like processed food, where it's packaged in a way to where you think you're getting value, but maybe it's been formulaically made. In this case, obviously, with processed food being made in factories and whatnot, to serve you a purpose that may strip away a lot of the nutrients, in this case being the creative kind of feeling behind the writing, which I think is a pretty cool way of wording it. And I definitely recommend everyone to check out the piece. But it's an ongoing thing that obviously will develop over time, especially in the context of school.
No, I think it's a terrific piece. Wholeheartedly recommend. I read it twice, particularly because she's a very good writer and a poet. And there's
Yes.
a lot of good examples. Also, she brings in other people she knows, and it's a very thoughtful. Again, more questions than answers. But the one thing I will say is that this business of processed and labeling is an important one. I went out of my way. I remember 2 years ago, over 2 years ago now, when I started my Substack, I said, I will use no AI in my writing. I don't know why I said that, because I just love the process of writing. So I don't tend to use these tools even for the research. I use it for a lot of other things. But the point is, I can totally see this business of organic writing being a thing, just like organic foods was a big thing. Started, Trader Joe's, wheat food, Whole Foods, etc. We may see same thing here, that writers just put out, hey, this is all done pure human thought. And that may be a differentiation for a little bit. Who knows? We shall see.
Yes.
But great read of the week. My read of the week, this time a little different. The last 12 shows I've had books that I've talked about. This time I wanted to highlight an AI paper, this time by Anthropic. And I will put up the links to this. It's a brand new paper that just got published, but it requires a little bit going into the weeds on the technology of large language models. One of the big trends over the last year has been the dramatic increase in use of a whole range of large and smaller models to work together, to train each other, to use it massively for reasoning purposes, for chain of thought, a lot of these technical terms. And what Anthropic's researchers found in this paper is that they found as you took larger models to train smaller models, or took larger models to run the reasoning for smaller models, etc., the smaller models would often pick up elements from the larger models that had nothing to do with the core queries. Somehow, mathematically, they would discover concepts that were in other experts, in the mixture of experts of these larger models, that had nothing whatsoever to do with the core query. So mathematically, they should not have surfaced in the smaller models. And they called the Anthropic researchers called it subliminal learning, which and they're trying to figure it out. AI researchers, and they've all been distracted of late by the talent wars and big comp packages and so on. But they've got their work cut out for them, because they were took a lot of effort to try and figure out why the subliminal learning was happening. And it's an important trend. It's important to understand what is going on, why it's going on, because it governs how we're going to be able to guide these models, keep them within guardrails, keep them safe, keep them secure. There's a lot of issues that come up because of this subliminal learning element that's being discovered. It's a lot of the solutions are not at all clear. And so it adds more work to making AIs more reliable, more understandable, more explainable. These are all hugely important topics, and this paper flags all of that. And so it'll be an important focus for the next couple of years at least. So I wanted to highlight that. And there are a couple of links in the show notes on this as well. So that brings us to our obsession of the week, Neal. And again, I'll let
Yes.
you kick off because you have another good
Yeah.
one here.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. It's a company that's obviously been in the news for a bit now, ever since Adobe tried to acquire them, a while ago, and they just recently IPO'd and have kind of set up a stance of going for what Adobe kind of stands for right now as Creative Suite, is Figma. Obviously, it was a matter of time before these AI features got integrated into design platforms like Figma, and it had been done for a bit, but it was in beta, and Figma just recently made it open to all of its users that their app building tool, which you can use to prompt using natural language to help your designs, is now public. The reason I wanted to highlight this is I've been a follower of Figma for a while. I think it's a great company, and they make a really good product that's kind of become the industry standard in the space of UI UX and wireframing and prototyping apps specifically. I mean, I think they have a lot going for them right now, but this AI feature that they kind of teased a while ago, and there was a lot of backlash because when they first announced it, it was over a year ago, where a lot of the designs that are being outputted seem to just mimic Apple's UI. And there was a lot of articles being written that we can link down in the show notes before, that kind of caused them to go back to the drawing board and reapproach this from the ground up point of view. And what they've ended up coming out with is something really interesting, because not only can you prompt with natural language what you want to build, but you can also provide design references, which is obviously a huge thing just in the life cycle of a product manager. Often a lot of things from concept start with a list of references or ideas that you want to try and implement into what you're building. And the fact that you can kind of plug these into the model and pair it with natural language prompts to then get animations and designs on your apps, I think is something I've been playing around with for a bit, just trying to get my hands into the UI UX side of things again. And these tools have definitely helped me a lot in my workflow. So that's kind of been my obsession of the week. And obviously they'll add more features as time goes on. So I'll have to recap this again soon as more things come out. But I think it's a great start for what they're trying to build in this space.
Awesome. No, I've been learning a lot more about Figma from their IPO stuff as well. The Substack AI Reset to Zero, a lot of the graphics on there over the last couple of years are thanks to your hard work using Figma. So
Yeah.
thank you,
All
Neil,
of
again
the
for that. So
all of the text stack
it,
diagrams and stuff are
yeah,
courtesy of Figma.
yeah. So I learned a lot about that through you on this. My obsession of the week is a topic that I've written a lot about, which are as AI goes from large language models to physical world devices, particularly as they're used to record our ambient conversations, transcribe them, make summary notes. Obviously, now you can't do a Zoom meeting without the notes or the discussions getting summarized, transcribed by AI, etc. But there's also a whole world, exploding world of standalone AI devices. These are from Claude that I use for recording meetings and conversations with, obviously, all parties agreeing to the recordings, because half the states, as I've written about, have multi-party regulations in terms of recording, etc. But this is a very big area, and there's an explosion of companies emerging in this area. OpenAI's merger with or acquisition of Johnny Ive's company also points to products in this direction. They've been talking about devices like this that would be on a pendant. There's another company called B Computer, and I just got their gizmo. It's a Fitbit-like device that one wears for just a 24/7 kind of recording. And the reason this was my obsession of the week, discussion points for this week, is Amazon just announced that they're buying B Computer for an undisclosed amount, and this stuff is going more mainstream. So whether it's the Claude, these devices, other devices, every major company is going to have their own versions, because again, the value is the data. Obviously, with permission of the users and so on, the data is massively important to train the models to make the answers better, etc. And this is the next big source of data. So these acquisitions, these companies are not about the physical devices. They're just the mechanism to hoover the things up. But this is another sign that this stuff is going to go way mainstream. So it's not just a few million nerds like me that love these gizmos. Everyone's going to have them in everything we do, and society's expectations, their behavior, their norms, what they think is creepy, not creepy, regulations, laws, all of that will have to catch up. And so that is my obsession, to just understand this, which has been for a long time. I remember 10, 20 years ago spending hundreds of dollars for pens that were this bulky that would record a lecture and so on. Very, very difficult to use. But now we are coming down to these devices. So anyway, so that's my obsession of the week. So I thought I'd mention that. And that concludes our show for this week, episode 13 of AI Ramblings. Thank you again for joining us. As usual, if you have any comments, thoughts, suggestions, let us know. And we would always, of course, appreciate likes and subscriptions on the YouTube and other places. And otherwise, thank you again for joining us. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next week.
See you next time. Thank you.